and infertility, and we looked at the measures of fertility. So we were able to define the terms of fertility, fecundity, and fecundability. And today we should be able to understand the differences, fecundity, definitions, and fertility, where we looked at of infertility, where we looked at primary infertility and secondary infertility and their particular causes in there. So we looked at the different measures of fertility, and these are very also for public health experts and statisticians. Research, or you're going to do is that you need to use if you wanted to establish the fertility levels in your population. And we said you can look at the total fertility rate and how you can calculate it. We looked at the total, we looked at this is all total fertility rate. We looked at the general fertility rate. We looked at the general marital fertility rate. We looked at the general fertility rate itself, the crude birth rate, and we also looked at the age-specific fertility rate, and we looked at the net reproduction rate. And also we were able to look at the gross replacement rate, where we looked at how many females are needed to replace a particular population. So we went ahead and discussed the factors that influence fertility as a rate, meaning we're talking about the percentages of fertility, and we said there are socioeconomic factors that play a significant role, but also education plays a significant role. How an individual accesses care is another role, another important factor that influences fertility. Then we looked at the cultural and religious beliefs or norms, use of contraceptives, government policies, and the interplay factors. And we looked at then the implication for the society, that the variations in fertility rates have profound implication for the society. And this includes that it can be able to determine how the demographics of a particular population shift. So today we just want to have a brief look at the prevalence of infertility, but also we shall look at the factors. However, we shall mainly focus after the causes of fertility. We shall focus on what we call as the societal determinants of fertility. And when we reach there, you will be able to understand some of the theories that are very important if you wanted to calculate your fertility discrepancies in a particular population. Those will be very key. So infertility, according to statistics, its prevalence affects about 10 to 15% of couples globally. So you get the number of couples in the world, and at least 10 to 15% of them are said to be having infertility. So this may be lower when as you reduce the denominator. Meaning, if you're looking at a country, you may realize that there are fewer cases than the ones that are being portrayed in the world. So meaning if there were about 10,000 couples, this statistics is showing that out of 10,000 couples, 1,000 of them have infertility issues. Silent population of over 180 million couples face infertility. So that you can see by WHO in 2004, the statistics were very dire there. But also, infertility care is often neglected and underestimated in developing nations. You realize that when individuals in our nations today are infertile, meaning they do not have the ability to produce, then we do not, in our health facilities or in our cultural areas, we just neglect these people. In certain cultural settings, the belief is that people who are infertile is either a reason or they are being punished, or there could be another spiritual reason as to why they could be facing the inability to bear children to term. So 12-month infertility prevalence ranges from 6.9 to 9.3% in less developed countries. So you can see that the problem is dire. Because remember, in our early definitions, we were able to state that if an individual stays for 12 months under a regular sexual intercourse and does not carry a baby to term, then WHO agrees that this person is called infertile. So you can see the prevalence in less developed countries. It ranges from an average of 6.9. So if you look at 6.9%, if you looked at 6.9% and you divided it by 100, it will mean then multiplied it by 10,000 couples, it will mean that out of 10,000 couples in developing countries, at least 630 of them face challenges. So it is also an issue that you need to look at. People may say these are rare cases, but you can realize that when COVID-19 kills one person, the noise is very high. But you can see that out of 10,000 people, if 630 of them have an infertility, the health sector may not pay a lot of attention in our developing countries. So the impact of infertility vis-a-vis the prevalence. So in prevalence, we're looking at the current state, that what are the current states of infertility. So we're looking at how the current states of infertility impact on someone's, either it's an individual, it is a societal, or it is an economic level, how they impact on that individual. So we're looking at the current situation vis-a-vis the impact it can cause in a particular setting, either an individual or a society. So we are looking at infertility causing emotional stress, strained relationships, societal stigmatization, and economic burden in a way that you realize that when someone feels infertile, they will look for all means economical. Either they are going to sell their houses and so that they can move any other solution finding place so that they can find solution to the problems of infertility. The societal stigmatization, we very well know that our societies believe that everyone should be able to give birth. So an individual's failure to do so would mean that they are stigmatized, they are abused. They say most times they will even tell you that you do not have a child, so you have no say in this community. All that kind of stigmatization. And then the person you are either married to, or your family relatives, or your peer groups, you start to have a very strained relationship with them because they feel you're not performing according to what they would want. Then you will always have the emotional damage because of all the strain that you're going through from either the outside world or the individual self, where you do not have self esteem. So there is also primary and secondary infertility, as we discussed earlier, and we're just giving it more highlight here that couples who never conceived despite regular attempts, And as I said, you can be able to realize that this person is trying to have children, but they cannot carry these babies to term. Just to remind you that here we are talking about inability to produce a live birth. So if someone conceives, if someone conceives and does not carry that baby to term, meaning either it comes as a stillbirth or not, in demography that is still infertility, meaning that the person may be fecundable. Fecunding meaning the physical ability to carry a child is there, but here we're looking at the final result of whether there is a live birth. So an individual's failure to have a live birth, despite having regular attempts, we can be able to classify this person as a primary infertility. And most times, like I said earlier, it is a 12-month period. Whereas in secondary infertility, we look at an individual who possibly carried a baby to term, maybe their firstborn to term, but later on struggles continuously to carry the next baby to term or to have another live delivery. So then we classify that as a secondary infertility. So again, we want to look at the statistics of infertility in Africa here, but again, we want to look at the major causes of infertility in Africa itself. And you can be able to see that infections or sepsis cause over 85% of female infertility in the region. And STDs and pregnancy-related sepsis contribute to pelvic infections. So you can be able to see that mostly it is these hemorrhage and a lot of infections that happen uh, either during pregnancy or before pregnancy, or sexually transmitted diseases that are hyping Africa's infertility, especially in sub-Saharan Africa. However, the male factor infertility is linked to genitourinary infections. So mostly it is as a result of these genital infections of either the penis among male or the vagina among women. So you'll be able to see that among male, most of their infertility is linked to the penis because they could be having a lot of infections. And because of the cultural or the society thinking that men should not seek care as early as possible, the thinking is that a man can actually wait. A man who immediately runs to a hospital or to a clinic when they have not started feeling that serious pain, the society takes him as a weak man. So then this man will wait for some time, and after the genitals have developed some swelling or they are rotting, that is when now he will move, and he may not be able to uh, to recover. Then we also have the limited access to assisted reproductive health technologies due to high costs. So failure to assist to get some of these assistances makes it a little hard for sub-Saharan Africa to reduce its cases. So, but also we want to look at issues of low sperm count. All these are factors that biologically affect fertility among men, and they also contribute to infertility or failure to make a woman pregnant, and we count it as part of infertility. So we just want to run through again the causes of infertility now, and we want to look at physiological factors. Here, one, we're looking at the male reproductive anatomy. So if you were to look at the male reproductive anatomy, issues of sperm production, issues of motility and issues of morphology. So now, just like I had said, that a man who may not have a strong sperm count, the chances that they may not be able to uh, impregnate a person are very high. That's why we are calling it as part of what? As part of physiological factors, but also as a cause of infertility. Then, when you're talking about motility, you're looking at the ability of an organism and fluid to move or get around. So, we're looking at the motility or the movement of the sperm from the male reproductive organ into. So, that kind of motility, that movement, is what we are looking at, and it is one of the determinants. So here, whereas we are looking at male reproductive anatomy just as a statement in your mind when we are referring to infertility, you should be able to understand that if we're talking about sperm production, then a person can be rendered infertile if their sperm production is very low, or may not make a female to conceive. Whereas if we're talking about someone being fertile, then it would mean that the sperm productions are higher, and then that can actually make an individual produce. Then when we're talking about morphology, we're looking at the shape of the reproductive organ. Some of the shapes may not be able to penetrate, and therefore it may be hard for reproduction to occur, or to fertile for the intercourse to occur. So, another physiological factor in that sense is then the female reproductive anatomy. And here we are talking about the ovulation, the fallopian tube blockage, and uterine issues. So, if these issues are there, that the woman may not be able to produce the egg to travel, the fallopian tube is blocked, the eggs cannot uh, cross through, or the woman cannot produce the ova to move, or maybe the woman has uterine issues with her uterus, and so forth, are some of the causes of infertility. But also in the physiological sense, we look at hormonal imbalances. Now, these are irregular menstrual cycles, and these are polycystic ovary syndrome, hormonal disorders, and some of these you may realize it if you go a little practical, that there are certain women after having undertaking their modern contraceptives, they may take longer to regain their fertility. Uh, then they will come and complain to you that they are struggling to regain their infertility. So some of these imbalances, these hormonal imbalances, are actually some of the causes of fertility. However, the hormonal imbalances can also be caused by uptake of modern contraceptives. For example, the emergency contraceptives very regularly. If you continuously take such, because they work in a hormonal manner, the chances that they may regularly cause a lot of hormonal imbalances around, and make your menstrual cycles irregular. Therefore, you may struggle to regain your fertility. Then we have environmental factors such as exposure to chemicals, pesticides, industrial chemicals, endocrine disruptors. But also we look at pollution of the air and water. We look at radiations, especially occupational exposure and medical procedures. So mostly we can look at exposure to certain machines. We can look at exposures to X-rays, because these are these are radiations that are natural, and as a result, they may cause a lot of multiplications or hormonal changes around your body, and therefore you may not be able to conceive as well. So your exposure to some of these pesticides as well may cause infertility, because we know that there are certain industrial chemicals that may not be are very safe for your body. But mainly the endocrine disruptors that keep disrupting the way your endocrine system works is very, very dangerous. And some of the causes environmentally that make people infertile. If you look at lifestyle, one of the huge factors that are leading to infertility, you're looking at diet. So poor nutrition affects your hormonal balance. So the type of feeding that you have will affect your hormonal balance. That is why some people may when they eat absolutely unbalanced diet, they may either, as a woman, you may grow extremely masculine or having more testosterone level, or when you eat without care, you may grow as a man. You may start to see a man growing very fat and start to have more feminine energy or more estrogen, and therefore this can actually cause infertility because your hormones are not balanced, and therefore you may behave or as an opposite being. But also we look at exercise, excessive or insufficient physical activity. So sometimes some people are excessively exercise. This may also cause infertility. But also insufficient physical activities may cause you infertility, because then your body is not charged up, and the description or the release of hormones is disrupted, because you are very inactive, and inactivity means that your cell replacements are also relatively very low. So substance abuse, when you talk about alcohol, tobacco, recreational drugs, all these we know that among also the motility of the sperm, and therefore an individual may become infertile. Then we look at chronic stress that impacts hormonal regulation. So because you're very stressed, the hormones that are helping in, in releasing certain dopamine or that help an individual become sexually active may become very hard, and therefore such people may even struggle to maintain or retain an erection to actually conceive. So those are some of the causes of infertility. So we want to look at the societal or proximate when we're talking about determinants of fertility. And in your free time, you can actually get time and read through this book by Bongat and other co-writers, who enumerate 9 major proximate determinants of fertility at the societal level. So we are looking at a society in a perspective, and this is one as an advantage for a demographer, but also as an advantage for a public health person or someone who wants to look at the community at a societal level, and they are able to determine the trend of fertility that you can be able to apply the measures of fertility to these proximate determinants, and you will be able to understand the fertility patterns in your community. Here we are talking about 9 major proximate determinants. And we're looking at marriage or union patterns, we're looking at contraception, we're looking at lactational amenorrhea, we're looking at postpartum abstinence, but we're also looking at pathological sterility, induced abortion, frequency of sexual intercourse, then spontaneous intrauterine mortality, and lastly, we look at natural sterility. And these we shall continue, we shall explain them because this is the last bit that I want us to handle this evening. So here, for the introductory, you were saying that studies of the causes of fertility uh, and their changes often seek to measure directly the impact of socioeconomic factors on fertility. So when you look at majority of the studies that have been done, they majorly look at the direct impact of socioeconomic factors on fertility. So the problem with to policymakers offering as they do to pinpoint mechanisms susceptible to manipulation by official policy. So despite this appeal, such approaches are considerably more problematic in the most time. Many researchers want to look at the socioeconomic factors as a broader and want to state that they directly influence fertility. For example, uh, if we say that the level, for example, the level of education of women is a socioeconomic indicator that is frequently found to be negatively related to fertility. So what happens is that in the studies, when they look at socioeconomic factors, they will be looking at factors like income, factors like education level. They'll be looking at factors of place of residence. These are socioeconomic factors, and then they will say that an individual with a higher level of education will have lesser children than a woman with a lower level of education. That is what most researchers do. But in this particular, you will further see how we do not use the social economic factors, but we further go ahead to look at more approximate factors because these socioeconomic factors act as uh, intermediates just. So a more detailed analysis may show that among educated women, marriage is relatively late, or the use of contraceptives is more frequent, thus clarifying the relationship between education and fertility. In general, the biological and behavioral factors through which socioeconomic, cultural, and environmental variables affect fertility. The primary characteristics of an intermediate fertility variable is its direct influence on fertility. If an intermediate variable, such as the prevalence of contraceptives, changes, then fertility necessarily changes. Also assuming that the other immediate fertility variables remain constant, while this is not necessarily the case for an indirect determinant, such as an income level may affect fertility, but it may not directly affect fertility. Why? Because whereas we're looking at education level, there are underlying factors such as the use of contraceptives. So in this case, what if someone who is uneducated use the contraceptive? They will also